Hey guys, there are moments when history stops behaving like a book and starts acting like a sleep-deprived teenager's diary. Messy, impulsive, and completely impossible to explain. If you have ever looked at the world and thought it cannot get any dumber than this, hold on. History still has a few cards it has not played. And if you like the kind of stories that make you laugh while quietly losing faith in humanity, hit follow. There are plenty more strange events hiding in the dark corners of your textbooks. Now let us start with an event where a flightless bird took down an army with trucks and machine guns. 1. Australia declared war on emus and lost. In 1932, farmers in Western Australia begged for help because crops were being destroyed. The culprits were emus, tens of thousands of them, almost 2 meters tall, running as fast as motorbikes, and acting like they were reclaiming ancestral land. The government responded with the only strategy that would make sense in a dark comedy. They sent the military with machine guns and launched an official eradication campaign. This was a real war. But shooting emus was not as easy as shooting a still target. They dodged bullets, broke into smaller groups, and scattered using tactics suspiciously close to special forces training. The trucks got stuck in the fields. The soldiers fired more rounds than the national average test score. The result was an overwhelming emu victory. The campaign was canceled after a few weeks, and the Emu War became a historical embarrassment, a true event where a flightless bird forced a government to retreat. Now imagine being a soldier returning from the front lines and having to explain that you did not lose because you ran out of ammo, but because they ran in zigzags. 2. If you think modern paperwork is a nightmare, try sending a mummy overseas. In 1974, the mummy of Ramses II, the legendary pharaoh of Egypt, began to decay from mold. To save it, Egypt decided to send the body to France for restoration. Everything was smooth until they hit one tiny detail. Under international law, every human body, even one that has been dead for thousands of years, needs a valid passport to enter a country. So instead of asking for an exception, the Egyptian government did the most reasonable thing in the most unreasonable situation. They issued a passport to a dead man. On paper, Ramses II had his full name, his title listed as King Deceased, and his biological status written clearly. Dead, not temporarily offline. Fully dead since 1213 before the Common Era. When the mummy arrived in Paris, he was welcomed like a head of state. Honor guards lined up. The Egyptian flag flew. All the formalities were there. And if you think that was the strangest part, it was not. The strangest part was that he later received a national medal for historical contributions, meaning he had been dead for 3 millennia and still got an award. Meanwhile, you are still waiting for a like on your latest LinkedIn post. 3. Some people are lucky enough to avoid a nuclear explosion once. And then there was a man who managed to do it twice in the same week. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a Japanese engineer, was on a work trip in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, right when the first atomic bomb was dropped. He survived, despite severe injuries. Then, in what might be the most unfortunate career decision ever, he took a train back to Nagasaki to report to his boss that Hiroshima no longer existed. 3 days later, while he was telling colleagues that a single bomb could destroy an entire city, the second bomb exploded right over him. Yamaguchi survived again. Not just survived, but lived long, lived well, and lived all the way to 2010. He became the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both nuclear blasts in human history. When asked how he felt about it, his answer was simple. No one should go through this once, let alone twice. And he was right. For the rest of the world, his story is a reminder of the horror of war. For the universe, he might be the only man who ever looked destiny in the eye and said, "You think you can surprise me?" 4. Most people try to survive one accident. Fidel Castro survived more than 600 attempts on his life. Starting in the early 1960s, the CIA spent decades, millions of dollars, and hundreds of ideas that could fill a textbook on how not to plan an assassination. They tried exploding cigars, seashells packed with bombs, scuba suits coated with bacteria, poisoned milk, coffee that could kill someone before they woke up, and even seduction plots. The only result was that Castro stayed alive while the ideas were embarrassing enough to make James Bond cringe. Fidel not only survived, but also gifted the world one of the most iconic beards on the planet and the legendary line. If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic sport, I would have a gold medal. The truth is, if the CIA had invested in learning Spanish instead of sniper gear, they might have at least talked to him before he laughed in their faces. Castro lived to 90, watching 10 CIA directors come and go. While people were holding secret meetings to figure out how to eliminate him, he was eating breakfast, smoking cigars, and reading the newspaper like the whole thing was a game where he was the one holding the rulebook. 5. Some family feuds make people stop talking at dinner. And then there is the feud that made the whole world walk in the products of two brothers who refused to look at each other for the rest of their lives. Adolf Dassler and Rudolf Dassler were two German brothers who grew up together and opened a small sports shoe workshop in their home. Everything went well until it very much did not. No one knows the exact reason. Politics, women, or maybe someone threw the wrong insult at the wrong dinner. But the outcome was clear. The brothers split the company in half. Adolf named his company Adidas, from his nickname Adi and their last name Dassler. Rudolf first named his company Ruda, then changed it to Puma because it sounded cooler. The two companies sat on opposite ends of the same small town, Herzogenaurach. Even the residents split their loyalties. People used to look at each other's shoes before speaking. It was not just footwear, it was a rubber and shoelace Cold War. Locals called their home the town of lowered heads because everyone kept staring at their feet before socializing. While the rest of the world wore shoes to run faster and jump farther, Adidas and Puma were busy running as far away from each other as possible. Family ties are broken, brands rose, marketing calls it brand positioning, psychology calls it the long-term grudge special. 6. Some fashion choices turn you into an icon, and then some choices make the whole world look at you and ask why. Adolf Hitler is famous for that tiny mustache right under his nose, like he started a full mustache and quit halfway through. Most people assumed it was intentional, a strange stylistic statement with purpose. In reality, it came from a reason no one expected: equipment problems. During the First World War, Hitler served in the infantry and was issued a gas mask. The problem was that with the full traditional mustache of the time, the mask would not seal properly. He did not want to die from gas and also refused to shave clean. So he chose a compromise: trim the sides and leave only the middle. The result became more widely recorded than anything he ever built or touched. Later, when he became a leader, he kept the look as part of his personal brand. But thanks to that, humanity gained a classic example of why safety and aesthetics should probably sit at different decision-making tables. Maybe to Hitler, it was just a practical choice, but to the rest of the world, it became proof that one bad mustache can haunt an entire century. 7. Some wars are fought for justice, some for territory, and then there are wars where the enemy is cats. Australia, for entirely serious ecological reasons, once declared war on feral cats. Not a few strays wandering through someone's backyard, but millions of wild cats quietly turning the local ecosystem into an all-you-can-eat buffet. Small native animals like marsupials, birds, and reptiles were being hunted so aggressively that the government decided to step in. And in Australia, stepping in usually means going big. The government announced a plan to eliminate 2 million feral cats over several years, using traps, poison drops, and even professional hunters. But no one seemed to inform them that cats are not a species you can easily schedule. They do not line up, they do not panic, and they absolutely do not care about national targets. After years of effort, the result was simple. The cat population barely changed. They kept living, breeding, and staring back at humans with the expression, "try again." While environmental budgets vanished bullet by bullet, the cats kept lounging in the sun like they owned the place. If the war with emus was a military joke, the campaign against cats was a reminder that in nature, humans are not the only ones who know how to play the survival game. 8. Some marriages make people raise an eyebrow, and then some marriages make the entire field of genetics want to take a collective day off. Cleopatra, the symbol of power and strategy in ancient Egypt, married her own brother to keep the throne. And not just once. First, she married Ptolemy XIII when she was 18. When he died in a civil war, she then married another brother, Ptolemy XIV. In the Egyptian royal family, this was not only legal but encouraged. They believed royal blood had to stay pure like untouched gold, and the only way to guarantee that was to marry inside the family. The result was family dinners that were not just tense but full of coup potential. Anyone could be both a sibling and a future usurper. For Cleopatra, marriage was not a personal choice. It was a political move. Love was irrelevant. Power staying in the family was everything. And if you think your family is complicated, remember Cleopatra had to share a home with someone who could poison her tea in the morning and still call her dear sister. Power makes people do grand things. Family makes all of it messy. 9. Some people go their whole lives without doing anything memorable, and one mistake is enough to define them. And then there is Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who won almost every battle he ever fought, yet the entire world remembers him for one slip called Waterloo. As one of the greatest military strategists in history, Napoleon defeated almost all of Europe and reshaped the political map with pure speed and strategy. He scared neighboring countries so much that they teamed up like struggling students trying to survive a group project. But with one loss, on one day in 1815, he fell at Waterloo. And just like that, every history book, every internet meme, every movie reduced his legacy to Napoleon lost at Waterloo. No one mentions the massive victories. They only remember the moment he was exiled to a lonely island like a cartoon villain. And what about his height? He was not short at all. Napoleon stood around 1 meter 69, above average for French men of that era. But thanks to a unit conversion mistake, the world decided he was tiny and even named a height complex after him. The conclusion: you can build an empire or rewrite entire eras of history, but one perfectly timed stumble is all people will remember. Not because you were bad, but because the world loves a drama that fits neatly into one sentence. 10. Some kings are remembered for their victories. Louis XIV is remembered for putting a toilet in the middle of his reception room and using it like it was nothing, worth mentioning. As the Sun King of France, he lived among gold, velvet, art, and absolute power. But instead of maintaining a royal image like a historical drama, he chose to greet visitors in a way modern people would describe as having zero concept of personal space. In his main reception room at Versailles, there was a chair that looked like a throne but was actually a toilet with a lid. Louis XIV used it while meeting officials, discussing state matters, or simply chatting. No curtains, no hesitation, no stepping out. To him, this was not rude. It was a declaration of power. If a king could sit in the center of the room, handle the most personal task imaginable, and still command full attention from the entire court, he needed no further proof of his status. While other leaders maintained their image through speeches, Louis maintained his through porcelain. And with that choice, he turned everyday bodily functions into part of royal protocol. Empires may rise or fall, but absolutely no one has tried to copy the toilet in the reception room tradition. 11. Some fictional characters become so famous that people assume they were real. Sherlock Holmes did not just escape the limits of literature, he outshined the man who created him. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer behind The Logic-Obsessed Detective, had been a doctor, an author, an amateur boxer, and a believer in the spirit world. While Holmes was the definition of pure rationality, Doyle believed in seances and once defended garden fairy photographs as scientific evidence. The contrast turned the relationship between author and character into something tense. When Holmes became too popular and overshadowed every other work, Doyle decided to kill him, pushing him off a waterfall in a short story. The reaction shocked him. All of England went into mourning for someone who did not exist. Thousands of angry letters flooded newspapers. Readers refused to buy any book that did not include Holmes. In the end, Doyle had to resurrect the character he tried to erase. From that point on, Sherlock Holmes became a global icon, while Sir Arthur Conan Doyle became the author living under the shadow of his own creation. One man created a legend, but the legend is the thing that made the world forget the creator. 12. Some people are afraid of the dark, some fear tight spaces, and then there was an entire civilization that decided the surface of the earth was not private enough and built a city deep underground. Derinkuyu, a massive underground city in Turkey, was discovered by accident when a man knocked down a wall while renovating his home and found an entire network of tunnels stretching dozens of meters down. The more they dug, the more they found. Layer after layer, eventually 18 floors beneath the ground. Enough space for about 20,000 people, plus livestock, kitchens, churches, storage rooms, and even classrooms. Meaning these people did not just hide, they brought their whole lifestyle with them. Most experts believe Derinkuyu was built as protection against invaders and harsh climate, with ventilation systems so clever that modern engineers still nod in respect. The entrances were sealed with massive rolling stones weighing hundreds of kilos, and they could only be locked from the inside. If you were outside and not invited, you were not getting in, no matter if you were a person or a piece of history. While the rest of the world imagined a city as something tall, bright, and crowded, Derinkuyu quietly proved that living underground could be more organized, convenient, and private than any modern apartment building. A city with no streetlights, no traffic jams, no heat complaints, and completely immune to drones. 13. Some laughs make you happy. Some laughs send you to the hospital. In 1962, at a boarding school in Tanzania, three students suddenly started laughing uncontrollably. There was no joke, no prank. They just laughed and kept laughing. The school thought it was nothing until dozens of other students joined in. Not joyful laughter, more like a system error. They could not study. They could not sleep. The school had to shut down. When the students went home to their villages, the laughter spread. Entire communities joined in. More than 1,000 people were affected. Some laughed for hours until they collapsed from exhaustion. Others laughed, then cried, then laughed again. No one could find a cause. No virus, no bacteria, no poison. Just laughter spreading like an emotional tsunami. Scientists called it mass psychogenic illness, a moment when stress explodes into strange collective behavior. People laughed because they saw others laugh. No one knew why it started. No one knew why it stopped. Nearly 2 years later, it vanished as if it had never happened. A mysterious outbreak you cannot prepare for because no one expects laughter to turn into a disaster. 14. Some words are created to communicate. And then there are words created as a joke that somehow become the most universal terms on the planet. Okay is the perfect example. Almost everyone uses okay. It crosses every language barrier and shows up everywhere, from business meetings to lunch texts. But few people know that its origin came from a 19th century American joke. In 1839, a Boston newspaper started a trend of intentionally misspelling phrases to be funny. They wrote all correct as all correct, then shortened it to okay. It began as humor, nothing serious. But readers liked the joke and repeated it, and it spread. Later, during a United States presidential election, one candidate used the nickname Old Kinderhook, also shortened to OK. Voters liked it because it was easy to remember. The two meanings blended. From a deliberate spelling mistake, OK became a global symbol for agreement, confirmation, and ending a conversation quickly. Today, people say OK without realizing they are repeating an old wordplay prank. That is how history works. Sometimes the thing the world accepts began as a planned typo no one bothered to fix. 15. Some fathers are strict. And then there was Joseph Stalin, a man who treated emotion like a national security threat. In 1941, his eldest son Yakov was captured by German forces. The news reached the Kremlin. Stalin's reaction was not pain or fear. It was a cold line. I will not trade a captain for a field marshal. Nazi Germany offered to exchange Yakov for a high-ranking German officer held by the Soviets. Stalin refused immediately. He said Red Army soldiers did not get special treatment, even if the soldier was his own son. Yakov stayed in a concentration camp and died soon after. Maybe suicide, maybe shot while trying to escape. No one knows for sure. What is certain is this: Stalin never showed regret. He believed personal sacrifice was necessary to maintain iron discipline. The story makes every modern psychologist quietly put down their pen. While most people would do anything to save their family, Stalin chose to hold the line like a machine. A leader who never bent, never softened, and constantly protected his image of invulnerability, even when the cost was his own blood. 16. Some kids get a perfect score for answering correctly. Venetia Burney earned a place in world history for answering quickly. In 1930, when a new object beyond the edge of the solar system was discovered, scientists had no idea what to name it. They were still debating names long enough to sound like research papers when Venetia, an 11-year-old girl in England, was asked for fun. She answered, Pluto. Short, striking, easy to remember, and sounding like the Roman god of the underworld. Her reasoning was perfectly logical. The planet was distant and cold, like the realm of the dead, so the god of the underworld fit best. Her grandfather, who happened to know astronomers, sent the suggestion to the Lowell Observatory in the United States, and NASA accepted it. Just like that, from a casual breakfast conversation, a child accidentally named a planet. Even when Pluto was later downgraded from planet to dwarf planet, the name remained untouched. There are thousands of scientists waiting for their chance to contribute to the universe. Venetia simply said the right word on the right morning and secured her legacy forever. It might be the most efficient statement in the entire history of astronomy. 17. Some machines are built to push limits. And then there was the Concorde, the supersonic plane that made the entire aviation industry look at its watch and wonder why everyone else was flying so slowly. Debuting in 1976, the Concorde could fly from New York to London in only 3 hours, twice as fast as a regular commercial jet. It broke the sound barrier, cruised above normal airspace, and carried passengers who were rich, busy, or extremely proud of their receipts. But the strangest fact was not the speed. It was the number of pilots. Throughout its entire operational history, only about 120 people were qualified to fly the Concorde. Meanwhile, more than 600 people have been to space, meaning you had a better chance of becoming an astronaut than sitting in the Concorde cockpit. Training was expensive, requirements were brutal. The technology was so advanced it felt like a toy not meant for mere mortals. The Concorde was retired in 2003, leaving behind the legend of a time when humans flew faster than sound, but still not as fast as fuel prices climbed. A symbol of ambition and a reminder that not everything built to be fast is built to last. 18. Some royals only know how to wave. And then there was Elizabeth II, who could wave, change engine oil, adjust spark plugs, and drive a tank. During the Second World War, at only 18, Princess Elizabeth joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service as an honorary junior commander. But instead of treating it like a ceremony, she decided to train as a mechanic and military driver. She learned to repair trucks, change tires, inspect engines, and operate all kinds of vehicles, from jeeps to heavy transport trucks. She was even recorded as being capable of driving a tank. While most European royals stayed far from danger, Elizabeth showed up covered in grease, wrench in hand, hair pinned under a service cap. This made her the only British royal ever to serve in active military training. After the war, she returned as queen and continued driving herself well into her 90s, no chauffeur needed. A royal icon who could swap a tire faster than palace staff could report it. And if anyone ever assumed the queen only sat on a throne, they might want to check their rearview mirror to make sure she was not the one driving a tank behind them. 19. Some wartime tragedies end up in history books. And then there was the USS Indianapolis, a story so grim that even Hollywood hesitated to retell it. In 1945, the ship completed a top-secret mission, delivering parts of the atomic bomb to a United States base in the Pacific. After the delivery, on its way back, it was sunk by a Japanese submarine. Hundreds died within minutes. Nearly 900 sailors were left drifting in open water. No time to send a distress signal, no immediate search. Days passed with no rescue. There were not enough life vests, no fresh water, no food. But the terror was not the hunger or the waves. It was the sharks. Huge great whites began circling. At first, a few, then dozens. They attacked one man at a time. Each night, more sailors vanished. By the fourth day, only 316 survivors were finally spotted and rescued. The sinking became the deadliest shark attack in recorded history, a tragedy that the United States military once tried to downplay, and a reminder that in the middle of the ocean, the enemy is not always above the water. Sometimes it comes from the silent deep below. 20. Some leaders enter history through speeches. Winston Churchill once stepped out of prison through a bathroom window. In 1899, when he was still a young journalist, Churchill traveled to South Africa to cover the Boer War. Not long after, he was captured and placed in a prisoner camp. But instead of panicking, he studied the walls, the guards, and the bathroom schedule. His plan was simple and bold. Climb through the small bathroom window behind the camp. One night, he did exactly that. No warning, no weapon, just a little food and the belief that someone out there would help him. After escaping, he hid in a coal shed, walked miles across hostile territory, and was eventually rescued by a British civilian living nearby. He made it back to safety and instantly became a hero in the eyes of the public. The escape did not just save his career, it became the foundation of the fearless image of the man who would later lead Britain through the World War. The story shows that before he was a legendary statesman, Churchill was a young man willing to do the extraordinary, as long as he had a bathroom window and a good enough reason to crawl through it. 21. Some records are remembered for terrifying speed. Walter Arnold made history by driving 8 miles per hour. In 1896, in England, Arnold drove his four-wheeled car past a police officer who was riding a bicycle. The problem was simple. He was going 8 miles an hour while the speed limit allowed only 2 in the city and 4 in the countryside. Instead of sirens or a high-speed chase, the officer immediately pedaled after him. After a dramatic pursuit that moved at the pace of a rushed afternoon stroll, Arnold was caught and became the first person in history to receive a speeding ticket. The fine was 1 shilling, equal to a few pounds today, but the historical impact was far bigger than the price. That single ticket marked the beginning of the global traffic enforcement system, One tap on the gas, one slow motion chase, and one piece of paper laid the foundation for millions of future drivers checking their mirrors and watching their speed. Arnold did not break a speed record. He started a tradition that still makes people sigh on the side of the road. 22. Some intelligence ideas are strategic. And then there was the CIA, which once tried to train a cat to be a spy. In the 1960s, at the height of the Cold War, the United States launched a project called Acoustic Kitty. The goal was to turn a real cat into a mobile listening device. They implanted a microphone, a battery, and an antenna into the cat, believing that an animal famous for being lazy and stubborn would somehow stroll into the Soviet embassy, gather intelligence, and raise no suspicion. After months of expensive training, they ran the first field test. The cat was released near a Target building. It walked a few meters into the street and was immediately hit by a taxi. The mission ended in under a minute. The project cost millions of dollars and was canceled right after. The CIA concluded that while the idea was technically possible, the cat showed a strong tendency not to cooperate. Among all intelligence failures, this remains the clearest example that some things simply cannot be trained, no matter how advanced your technology is. And cats are always at the top of that list, even when you claim you are trying to save the world. 23. Some people stay strong through hard times. And then there was Charles XII of Sweden, a man who stayed strong through a cannonball hitting him in the face. In a battle in 1713, while commanding his army, Charles was struck in the head by artillery fire. The shot did not kill him. It only punched a hole through his skull and left his face looking like he had just finished a football game against a tank. Officers panicked, certain their king was dead. But he was not. Not only did Charles survive, but he kept commanding the army with his head still wrapped in bandages. The doctor told him to rest. He refused. Most people need recovery time. Charles needed more maps and weapons. To him, the wound was a minor detail. When it healed, his skull had a permanent dent, which he treated as proof of temporary immortality. Although he eventually died in another battle, the story of giving orders after being hit in the head by a cannonball turned him into a symbol of royal stubbornness. If you ever think you had a bad day, remember there was once a man who got shot in the brain and still tried to finish his shift like nothing happened. 24. Some places have politics as messy as yarn after a cat attack. And then there was Rabbit Hash, a small town in Kentucky, where everyone agreed the best candidate for mayor was a dog. In 1998, during a local fundraiser, residents held a symbolic election. The winner was Goofy Borneman Calhoun, a mutt who became the first mayor who could not speak a word and still earned the love of the entire town. People quickly realized they did not need a mayor who talked a lot. They needed one who behaved, wagged his tail, and did not commit corruption. After Goofy, several dogs continued to win the office. One of the most famous was Wilbur, a French bulldog elected in 2020 with more than 13,000 votes, far more than the town's actual population, because people from everywhere joined in. Wilbur did not pass laws or sign orders, but he brought tourists and raised tens of thousands of dollars for the community. While many places struggle with controversial politicians, Rabbit Hash proved that leadership does not need speeches. It just needs someone who does not bite anyone and can maintain unity with four paws and a well-timed tongue sticking out. 25. Some people live long thanks to diets, meditation, and avoiding stress. Kane Tanaka of Japan lived more than a century by drinking soda, playing board games, and refusing to rest. Born in 1903, Kane was recognized by Guinness as the world's oldest living person for years. She lived past 119, surviving 2 world wars, a battle with cancer, and the loss of 2 husbands. While most people imagine old age as a time to relax with family, she chose to live on her own in a nursing home, play traditional board games, and eat chocolate every day. She had 140 descendants, but still cared for herself longer than many of them could manage. When asked for her secret to longevity, she answered simply, "Live happily and do not bother anyone. No miracle diet, no special workout, just a quiet, steady approach to life." While many chase eternal youth, Kane proved that living long is not as difficult as living long while still excited enough to win at board games and ask for the next bottle of cola. 26. Some structures are built to serve humanity. And then there is the Panama Canal, where the first official traveler was not a ship, not a crew, not a human, but a turtle. When the canal was completed in 1914, the world waited for the first vessel to cross. But before any ship could even warm up its engines, a turtle drifted with the current from the Pacific to the Atlantic. No ceremony, no trumpets, just patience and slow, determined paddling. Engineers found it after the journey was done and officially recorded it as the first living creature to pass the full length of the canal. While humans spent decades digging, blasting, sacrificing technology, time, and lives to connect two oceans, the turtle simply needed the right current and a little curiosity. It did not know it set a record. It did not ask for a certificate, but it still became part of modern maritime history. The story shows that sometimes going slow, without goals, without pressure, is the fastest way to end up in the history books without even trying. 27. Some kings handle natural disasters with prayer. And then there is Xerxes of Persia, who punished nature the way you would discipline a soldier guilty of treason. In 480 BC, as he prepared to invade Greece, Xerxes ordered the construction of a massive pontoon bridge across the Hellespont. The moment it was finished, a storm rose and tore it to pieces. Instead of seeing it as weather, Xerxes reacted as if the sea had personally betrayed him. He commanded his men to whip the water 300 times while delivering an official-sounding curse like he was filing paperwork against the ocean. He didn't stop there. He also ordered iron shackles to be thrown into the sea, as if the waves could be sentenced to prison. The ritual was carried out by soldiers who swung their whips obediently, too afraid to ask why they were punishing saltwater. It was one of the rare moments in history when a mighty empire declared war on a natural element and believed discipline and anger could win. The outcome didn't change. The sea kept storming. The bridge had to be rebuilt. But at least the ocean learned that next time it should think twice before upsetting a king capable of issuing administrative punishment to water. 28. There are acts of revenge driven by emotion. And then there is Princess Olga of Kiev, who avenged her husband with strategy, cold logic, and a handful of pigeons. When her husband was killed by a neighboring tribe, they made the mistake of proposing marriage to her in hopes of seizing power. Olga agreed, outwardly, but only to repay blood with ingenuity. First, she killed the entire group of envoys who arrived to ask for her hand. Then she invited the second delegation to her husband's funeral and killed them, too. Still not finished, she pretended to accept the proposal on one condition. The people of the rival city must send her gifts of pigeons and sparrows. When enough birds arrived, she tied oil-soaked fire starters to their feet and released them. The birds flew home to their nests built under the thatched roofs of the city. Within a single night, flames spread from the rooftops downward, burning the entire settlement to the ground. No army, no siege, just strategy, precision, and a level of ruthlessness that bordered on mathematical. Olga was later canonized as a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church, proving that apparently you can burn down a city using pigeons and still become a saint, if your timing and motivation are impeccable. 29. Some kings leave their mark through policy. Henry VIII left his on a saddle. By the end of his life, the English monarch weighed around 180 kilograms, a number large enough to make every horse in the royal stables reconsider its career. In his youth, Henry was athletic, handsome, and skilled in jousting and hunting. But years of feasting, leg injuries, and a royal diet made of meat wrapped in more meat sent his weight rising without breaks. Eventually, he became so heavy that he could no longer mount a horse on his own. The court had to design a custom pulley system solely to lift the king from the ground onto the saddle. No one dared comment because this was a time when insulting the king's body could cost you your head. His saddle was also built specially, wider and reinforced to avoid any embarrassing collapse during parades. Some people whispered that even the pulley groaned every time it lifted him. While many leaders tried to ride the wave of history, Henry VIII rode with the help of ropes, manpower, and the unyielding force of gravity. 30. Some elite units are trained for special operations. And then there are dolphins, which the U.S. Navy once officially recruited to locate underwater mines. During the Cold War, the U.S. began training dolphins thanks to their extraordinary biological sonar abilities. They were taught to detect unusual objects, attach marker devices to suspicious spots, and signal their handlers. The results exceeded expectations. Dolphins were fast, accurate, and happily cooperative as long as they were rewarded with fish on time. They worked quietly but effectively in missions such as harbor protection, mine detection, and even tracking unknown divers. While humans required heavy machinery and complex data, dolphins only needed a quick swim to locate something hidden on the seafloor. The program was so successful that it lasted for decades and is still used in certain classified operations. So if you ever doubt the intelligence of marine animals, remember there's a species that helped maintain national security by swimming around, spotting threats, and blinking at the right moment. And they never asked for a raise or a vacation days.